Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. And today I have with me Dr. Dawn Filos, author of Tales of a Pet Vet, Stories from the Clinic, and House Calls. Dr. Dawn has been a small animal vet for over 32 years. She's worked in the clinics, and she started her own house call practice. She has a blog, enjoys teaching, and she is a great resource and full of advice and recommendations for pets and vets. Her work, Tales of a Pet Vet, is sort of likened to James Herriot's All Creatures Great and Small. She has sort of a behind-the-scenes view of the life of a vet, lots of humor, sort of Marley and Me style. So, Dawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, let's start at the beginning, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your writing, how you got started writing.
Well, I had been practicing for about 20 years or so, and part of that process, I enjoyed like teaching. I would do CPR classes for vets and paramedics and different things, and an opportunity came up to teach a pet first aid class at a community college. So I had all this information that I had gotten together for the course. And I thought, well, gee, this is useful for clients. So I put it onto a website. I made it a blog that started out purely informational. And then with time, I would refer clients to it. But then I just had this forum and I started writing sort of personal stories, like about, my poorly trained dog or dogs, for example, or just some stuff that interests me. I'm fascinated with the benefits of the human-animal bond and a lot of the stuff that I talk about in the book, and just this transformation of, some of the crazy stuff we all do for our pets that I've seen evolve in my career and in my lifetime. And I'm the first one to admit it. I'm not judging. It's just like, oh, this is nuts, but I do as well. Mm. And those stories and just seem to get the most feedback and comments. And so I would not share them. And it wasn't just my friends and family. It was other people that seemed interested in that. And that was sort of the inspiration for the book. Like, well, if other people are interested in it, maybe it's worth sharing. For example, people don't always get, if your pet passes away at work, if they're not pet people, they may not get it. But there's this whole community of people just like me. And it was sort of a way for us to communicate, like, I'm just like you, but I have this other background. I have more insight into it. And people love their pets, and they seem to always want to be a better pet parent, and there is a lot of information out there. It's important that it's the right information. So that was where it came from. That's what I thought, why not? And Here I am several years later.
Nice. And were you always an animal lover from the time you were just really young?
Yeah, I talk about this in the book. My family and my grandmother and my mom were animal fanatics. I mean, my father was an immigrant from Greece, where he was not raised with animals in the home, but it was a very interesting upbringing that I had. And there were always dogs, and we always had cats that came and then left because my mother was allergic. Sadly, mercifully, I am not allergic because I adore them. We even had a pet monkey, which is in the book. And nowadays, we were just sort of well-known pet fanatics. So when I meet these people and I get them, I lived that life, and it was a wonderful life. And I used to think that maybe we were the most extreme of what we were willing to do. And one of the greatest things in my career is to meet, we were not extreme. I mean, I always say, being a veterinarian in large part restored my faith in humanity, because I'm amazed and to see what people are willing and able to do, that it's amazing. And I've been able to kind of witness it and play a small role in it, which has been one of the joys of my career. And so, yeah, we were animal lovers,
Yeah,
a
that's
little
great.
bit famous for it. Yeah. And
What was the point at which you felt like that this was your direction to move into being a vet?
well, I had all these experiences and we had all sorts of complicated cases, my own pets, and I talk about that in the book as well. But I was always sort of a science dork. I don't want to say that, but I was torn between, or not torn, but I considered briefly becoming a pediatrician. But ultimately, and then there was this in New York City, which is still there. We were outside of New York City and had a very complicated. Kate, my dog, was hit by a car, and so we needed a specialist. It was in the city, and we had all these trips and follow up, and I was there for every one of those visits, and I was inspired, like, oh, they're just like us, and I thought, this is what I want to do. It's interesting that both of these types of patients can't speak for themselves. So you are reliant on the parent or pet parent, which is a new term, to get a full history. And I'm one of those people. I have 3 kids, and there's some people that prefer children that can talk and walk, but I love watching newborns form and communicate non-verbally. And that's what we do as veterinarians. We're certainly speaking to the clients, but they speak in body language and interpret it. And that's a lot of what I do as a veterinarian. And I think that I see it as a challenge. And so I think that combination brought me to that decision.
Yeah. What was the point at which you felt like you had something to offer vets as well, not just pet owners, but sort of moving up, to share your knowledge, the things that you have learned with vets themselves, with the other doctors?
Well, a lot of this information, it's geared to everyone. It's for all pet lovers. And I certainly, so I've written it. I think so when veterinarians that I know, or have veterinary authors in particular, have really done me the favor and honor of reading my book and appreciating it. I'm grateful, and I've read all of their books, because on one level they're laughing or relating to these stories because we have these similar experiences, and as pet parents and pet lovers. But another thing that really motivated me to write this book, and I don't presume to say that while it's a memoir, it's not just about me. This book I see as the 2 goals, I think, of sharing these stories is, one, these stories kind of came through me. Like, these are things that I've experienced because I was fortunate enough to be welcomed into people's homes or into their lives as their vet. But my stories are my experiences. While they're certainly my own, they're not unique to me. I'm speaking for my colleagues. I want people to know this is what this life is like. And if you're thinking of doing it, here's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But also, sadly, and I talk a little bit about this in the book, with social media and people typing and saying things that there is a lot of kind of mean things that are sometimes said. I mean, it's medicine. You don't always have a good outcome. And oftentimes, and we're not alone as veterinarians, it happens in other professions, but we happen to have a very high, the highest or one of the highest rate of suicides for many reasons, in large part due to this disenfranchisement. Like, we're doing all we can and to help these animals, and people are like, we're in it for the money. And okay, there's some money, but if you were in any business to make a lot of money, I do not advise you to go into veterinary medicine, because there's loans and everything. Everyone I've ever met who is a veterinarian is in it we're passionate about it and what we do. And if you're a veteran, if you want to be a veterinarian and you think, oh, I don't like to work with people, I just like animals. Well, that is also not the business you want to be in, because
Right.
and I happen to really like working with people for the most part, and meeting people, particularly senior clients, which another can talk about how that motivated me to not only be able to come to them in their home. That's a large part of what I love about my house call practice, but people have interesting lives and stories and stuff. They have so much more to tell and share with me, and they're far more interesting than my life. And I've had an opportunity to meet all these amazing people, and I have a lot of stories that are their stories. And, but so it was sort of a shout out to my colleagues and to my clients, who I've met some amazing people. They've changed my life for the better. And my family and friends are like, oh, tell that story again. So here it is in print.
Nice. And your decision to start a home, a house call practice, what did that grow out of? What did you have an experience that led to your decision to do that?
I had a few experiences that motivated me, and I was working relief. And I'm one of these people that I'm not a surgeon that's detached, in the back. I enjoyed, and I would do relief work, which I did for on and off for over 20 years while I was full time. I sort of did every aspect of veterinary medicine in private practice. And I would do a shift, treat a complicated case, and lose track of the clients. And I'd call and follow up. And I had prior been full time, so I missed following up on my patients and seeing how they did. So that was one aspect of it. Another aspect is I would work at clinics, and I would see a lot of elderly clients come in by cab, to bring in their cat, and they lived alone with these pets, and they're spending all this extra money. And I thought, this is awful. I feel it's terrible. They're waiting until the worst, it's too late. And a lot of what I spoken in my community college course was what I taught, and what I always strive to do is, as a vet, I would much rather see a patient and address a problem early in the process until it's too far along or much more serious. And I saw that happening again and again. I also it was very important to me to be able to make sure people understood and speak in their language, and get better at that, and figuring out, is this person detail oriented? Do they want the big picture? Do they understand? And I would realize certain clients, particularly elderly, you needed to say it 4 times or write it down. And then, you have this 15-minute roughly appointment time allotted to you. And some cases you needed more time. And I couldn't do my job as well without that opportunity. So all of that. And I did some in-home euthanasias, and that really became, to me, life altering, because prior to having done that, it didn't even occur to me that would be what it actually, until I did it. I never even thought I would want to do an in-home euthanasia. I thought that I would remember my pet in this room where it happened. But the reality is, when our pets pass, you remember them everywhere. You don't just remember that last moment. And I realized that it was the single greatest gift that we can give our pets. And I believe that. And so I was able to do that as part of my practice. But I remember it was a 10-minute conversation. I said, I think I'm just going to do this, said to my husband. He's like, well, you should. What have you been waiting for? It was literally that much of I'm done working in the practice. And here I am, like 14 years later. And that was the perfect niche for me. I'm better at medicine. I used to think I wanted to be a surgeon, and it turned out I wasn't very good at that. It just didn't work out for me. And I found out what I was better at, and what brought me some joy in my career. And it came about 20 years into my career. So it took me a little while to be ready to have my own practice. I had experience and I had more confidence. I could have never done it when I was a new graduate personally. So it happened at the right time.
Yeah. You reminded me of an experience I had, the death day of a cat that I was basically caretaking because of it actually belonged to my landlady, but she was overseas and hadn't been able to take her cats with her, and so I was looking after them, and it was quite a long, agonizing, terrible. I wish that I had known you and that you had been nearby at that moment. I certainly would have reached out to you. It was hard, really hard.
It's awful, and no matter how, it's like you can be mentally prepared and it's the right decision. And I can say this from experience, but that day, you think with your heart, and it takes about 2 weeks. And that a huge part of my time was spent with conversations, making sure I did not ever want to come to the home without being 100% or as confident as I could be that it was the right decision. I wasn't just for hire. Yeah, and because I did have one opportunity where I was misled, and my team and I went in and we declined to do it. And he had said he had tried to find a home, and it was a much younger cat than he said. And we all left in tears, and I swore never again to put myself or my staff through that. But everyone, I think, remembers their entire life, every pet. They remember that moment with their pet, their last moments with that pet. I know I do. And I think I speak for most pet people, animal lovers. And so I've had some amazing, several hundred of these experiences, and I've been honored to be there. And I go into most of the book is a lot of stories, and there's a ton of humor in it. And it's just a little bit about me and good, bad, and like kind of crazy things that have happened. But I do go into more detail about the euthanasia experience and the in-home experience, because a lot of people, I think, if they experience it, then they often say, I wish I had known about this for my last pets. And honestly, when I started my business in 2014, there were very, very few of us. No one had even knew it was a possibility. Where did you hear about me? It was word of mouth. And then about 5-6 years later, I Googled you, and I was fortunate. I relocated, I left my home. So I had to leave my practice, and a company, Better Vet, they purchased their in-home treatments and euthanasias only. And I was so relieved that my clients had someone or somewhere to go, because there's a vet shortage. And I struggled for years trying to make sure they were in good hands. So they are, and confident in that. And that COVID had a lot to do with that, because this business, it was started during COVID, not mine. So this pandemic came at the right time in many respects, because it forced more people you didn't have the opportunity. You could go to a vet, but you had to sort of leave your pet in the parking lot in the hands of others. And that was not ideal. So that gave me an opportunity to move. And now I do relief work and occasional, but it was the right time as well. It all kind of worked itself out for me in my not retirement, but relocation. I was able to do it and put my head down on the pillow at night, not worry about my families that I would miss.
That's great. Let's just take a short pause, and we'll come right back. In stories tailor-made for pet lovers, a seasoned veterinarian shares her good, bad, and messy days on the job and highlights the undeniable magic of the human-animal bond. Dr. Dawn Filos has always had a passion for animals, and with a lot of hard work and perseverance, she turned that passion into a career. Here, with emotional honesty, Dr. Dawn shares her colorful, memorable journey from nervous novice to seasoned, self-assured doctor. This modern-day James Herriot ultimately finds her niche as a house call vet, where she creates a way to practice on her own terms with the privilege of unique, intimate access into the homes and lives of her beloved patients and their human families. Sometimes heartwarming, sometimes sad, and often hilarious. Tales of a Pet Vet will resonate deeply with pet lovers everywhere. Get your copy today at amplifyaudiobooks.com. And we're back. So Dawn, tell me a little bit about what the audiobook production process was like for you.
Well, actually, I really enjoy so far the audiobook process. And I'm driving in the car with my business. I drive a lot. I'm an avid audiobook listener. And so I had real strong opinions about what I did and didn't want in the book. First and foremost, I just can't bear listening to my own voice. And I thought all of this, I probably, even though it was a memoir, is a memoir, and a lot of people prefer to have it read by the author. And I prefer to listen to autobiographies that are by the author. But in this case, I really just thought I wanted someone who would not have an accent, at a good pace, who sounded about my age, who could get the humor, because there's so much humor and a little bit of snarky kind of comments, but yet there's also some very serious content. And so I knew almost immediately when the audition process that the person who I selected was perfect. And, she didn't sound like act like, Sir Laurence Olivier, or she had to be kind of like me. And I laughed because when they were asking me for guidance on what am I looking for, I can answer it well now, but at the time they said, who is an actress that would play you in the video? And I laughed because my husband was always asking me that, not that there is a movie. But a week later, I had an answer, and I said Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who I think is brilliant and hilarious and about my age. And that was helpful for this audition process, which was just funny. Apparently, subsequent to that decision, some friends are like, oh no, Marissa Tomei. But I'm like, no, Julia is my girl. We're good. I've made that decision. And they're just so, and then there's a few sound effects and different things and music that just a little bit peppered through that was the most fun I've had, kind of matching it up. So I guess if anyone listening to this after the book, I really hope you enjoyed that. And it was really fun working with Elias, who, helping me do that, and everyone. It's just been much more fun than I anticipated. And I'm really glad I did it and worked with you. It is there's a lot more to it than I thought, of course. And I think they're doing a great job.
Yeah. Great. Let's talk a little bit about the title. The significance of the title, or how you came to land on your title. What was that process like for you?
Well, that was I'm going to guess that this is maybe the final of about 10 working titles. So because the book with the publisher, we had to sort of be in agreement, and the original title was House Call Vet, but it's not just about my house calls. So what I really had liked was Veterinary Confidential, another nod to Anthony Bourdain, for anyone that knows him, a behind the scenes look at veterinary medicine. But that idea did not work. And then so we agreed on Tales of a Pet Vet. And honestly, if one more person comes up to me and says, you should have spelled it TAILs. And I get that. I know, and my mother and people are all saying it, but I'm happy with it. But that was not taken. And then the subtitle was, we debated, but to point out that it's not just it's stories from the clinic and house calls, although it's not just stories. And the Tales of a Pet Vet, as opposed to I believe the last title that we debated was something veterinary. It was too clinical, and my website, I have this information I was talking about with my website, it's called Dr. Dawn the Pet Vet. And my social media. So I like that people know I'm not a horse vet, I'm a pet vet. So I think that title gives more information, even though I mention horses. And there's a story in the book about how I'm an inept horse vet. So I'm not at all an equine veterinarian, but I thought it sort of could tie in a little bit to my site, but mainly it was for those reasons. And Dr. Dawn my name is a shortened Greek name. And so people could never pronounce my name, Filos. So I would always just say, just call me Dr. Dawn. So I'm Dr. Dawn, the pet vet. So it all kind of came together in the title, and I hope it works. And I hope that my intent is people get it when they read the title and it makes them want to read it.
Yeah, I think it's very catchy. So, yeah. And what would you like your readers, your listeners to take away from the experience of reading or listening?
I want them to just realize as they go through life that I hope that they find a vet that they love and feel confident, and that they realize that we're doing the best that we can, no matter the outcome. Give them the benefit of the doubt. And if you find someone, just we know that the majority of our patients, I think, understand that and understand us. But this was my way of saying, we have this education, but we're just like you. We're in these same situations where we're frazzled. We can't think straight if our animal's sick. But we love our pets. We cry when all the anxiety and the behind the scenes. They need to know that they are not just that they're just a client. They become part of our heart. And decades ago, somebody told me, a realtor told me, a friend, that the hardest thing to replace when you move is your hairstylist, which I firmly believe, your pediatrician for your beloved human children, and your veterinarian. So I always say, if you're not happy, keep looking. And I do hope that while I know my clients and patients are in good hands, that maybe they miss me a little bit, that they knew how much they meant to me. And so I think that overall, and I feel like it's a collective shout out. You go from puppy and kittenhood to the end of life, all these experiences. And I talk about my extended family and just some of the stuff that I've experienced, so I feel like anyone who's ever lived with pets will maybe not all the stories, but will laugh when appropriate, or they might say, oh, that was similar, or now I get why they did that, and get different benefits from it. And we're all sort of pet lovers. So, and I love when people share on social media with me. And one of the stories, just I really try to bring out in this book, that particularly with the house call practice, that I didn't just come into their homes, they let me into their lives. And it was such a trust issue. And while I didn't do all the surgery, I had a relationship with the hospital that you could get full service, but you're sacrificing maybe having a 24-hour staff to have me alone. But I grew up in a sort of a small town where there was this Dr. Miller, who was our general practitioner, and it seemed like everybody went to him and everybody knew him, and you'd see him on the street and he knew you, and he knew your whole family. He treated all of us from babies. And you don't get that in human medicine anymore. There's like this movie, Doc Hollywood, which I love, in this town. And I'm like, I wanted that. And I ended up having that in my house call practice. And I would be out at the park or the supermarket, and I would see my clients, or we'd be in a restaurant. My family would roll their eyes because I'd be chatting
right.
but it was, to me, the greatest the greatest thing. And when I would do relief, I would have to come up to speed on years of reading through records just to introduce myself. And I was a fresh set of eyes, but I hated that. I liked it was ingrained in me, and I could, how's, Bailey's rash, I'm out on jogging on the bike path, and I would have a follow-up, and it was that simple. And so for me personally, that was wonderful. So I sort of achieved that in my career, and it was a gift, and it really made me love what I do again.
Yeah, nice. And so how can our listeners learn more about you and your writing and, find your blog and tell us?
So my blog is similar to, it's drdawnthepetvet.com. There's hundreds of different, even more, there's news, there's behavior recommendations, there's advice, there's things you can buy, there's funny articles, there's an author page where you can buy the book. I'm also on Amazon, and there's links to all of my socials and where you can buy written. And I've written some articles in other online and print journals. I used to do some medical mystery writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer when I used to live in Pennsylvania. And hopefully there'll be more writing, all of which I update on that in my social media, which is, and in my LinkedIn, I'm Dr. Dawn the Pet Vet, but like with an Dr.Dawn_Pet Vet on Instagram, where I post almost daily. I enjoy doing it, and there's giveaways, there's excerpts about the book, and just updates on other things that I'll be doing. So my Dr. Dawn the Pet Vet website is probably the most comprehensive place to start.
Great. And of course, your audiobook is available on Amplify Audiobooks, so you definitely want to get that there. And I understand that you're also available for public speaking and teaching. What else would you like us to know?
I would love to do that. I really do enjoy meeting people, and other than I'm scheduling some book events and book fairs, which will, I think, be for a while once the book is out, or in and around the release, but then thereafter. And I can do Zoom book talks, book clubs, or in person if I happen to be in that area, which I really enjoy because you get feedback. And then I get to hear more stories from people and enjoy that. So forever, that you can reach out to me through my website, or through social media for that. And I guess through my publicist, and I'll make sure that's all clear on my website as well.
Great. Well, again, this is Dr. Dawn Filos, author of Tales of a Pet Vet, Stories from the Clinic and House Calls. Dawn, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. It was fun, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.